From now on, your paycheck goes into my account. You don't need anything anyway, my son said. The words, spoken in a casual, offhand tone, landed in the quiet of my small, tidy living room like a grenade. He didn't look at me when he said it. He was too busy scrolling through his phone, one leg bouncing impatiently, already annoyed by the conversation he himself had started. My name is Althea Reed. I am 58 years old, a widow, and for the last 30 years, I have been a senior conservator at the City University's Rare Manuscripts Library. My life is one of quiet, meticulous care. I am a woman who rebinds 17th-century books, who can identify the origin of paper by its fibers, who has the patience to spend 100 hours restoring a single, priceless map. My hands are steady. My mind is sharp. But to my son, Jamal, and his sharp-eyed wife, Bianca, I was simply a utility. My paycheck? I repeated, my voice barely a whisper, hoping I had misheard. Yes, your paycheck, Jamal said, finally looking up, his eyes flat and cold. It was a look he had inherited from his late father, a look that preceded a storm. Bianca and I have been looking at our finances. We're building an empire, Ma. We can't have you just sitting on assets. Your house is paid for. Your car is old. What do you even buy? It makes more sense to centralize our family income. Our income? Don't be difficult, he snapped. You get your little pension, don't you? That's enough for your church collection plate, or whatever it is you do. From now on, your salary from the library is direct deposited into our main account. Bianca will set it up. Bianca, who had been inspecting my mantelpiece with a look of disdain, as if my framed photos were an offense, turned and smiled. It was a thin, tight smile that never reached her eyes. It's just cleaner this way, Althea. For the family. For the family. The family that only materialized in my home at 7 p.m. every single night, expecting a free dinner. The family that borrowed my car for weeks, returning it with the gas tank on empty. The family that saw my life's work, my little library job, as a quaint hobby that produced a paycheck they were now entitled to. The betrayal was so profound, so breathtakingly arrogant, that it didn't even register as pain. It registered as a click. It was the sound of a 30-year-old lock, the one labeled unconditional motherly love, seizing up and rusting into place. I looked at my son. My only child. The boy I had raised, whose mind I had nurtured, whose college education I had paid for out of my own modest savings. He was a stranger. A greedy, entitled stranger who saw his mother as a line item in his budget. So, I did the only thing I could. I quietly agreed. You're right, Jamal, I said, my voice soft and smooth. I even managed a small, tired smile. It's all so complicated. You're so good at these things. Whatever you and Bianca think is best. Now, are you staying for dinner? I was making that pot roast you like. The relief on his face was immediate. He had expected a fight, tears, a guilt trip. He had received none. Because I was difficult. Because I was emotional. But because I agreed, I was Ma again. Yeah, Ma, of course, he said, his good humor restored. We'll be back at 7. Don't go light on the potatoes this time. They left. The door clicked shut. And the counterattack began. Dr. Althea Reed, the quiet book conservator, punched a number into her phone. Not a lawyer. Not yet. First, I called a man named Marcus, the head of the city's most exclusive high-end consignment and estate liquidation firm. Marcus, it's Althea Reed, I said, my voice no longer soft or tired. It was the voice I used when directing $1 million acquisition for the library archives. I need a full team. Tonight. My house. I am liquidating everything. I want it empty by 7 p.m. tomorrow. There was a stunned silence. Althea? Is everything all right? You have the finest collection of mid-century furniture in this city. Not to mention your personal library. Everything is perfect, Marcus. I'm moving. I want the house cleared, cleaned, and staged for sale by the end of the week. I want top market price. I'll be in your office tomorrow morning to sign the paperwork. Can you do it? For you, Althea? We'll be there in 2 hours. My next call was to a high-end, long-term stay hotel downtown. I booked their best suite, indefinitely. My last call was to my bank. I set up a new primary account, rerouted all my income, my little salary, my pension, and the substantial monthly dividends from a trust my grandmother left me, a trust Jamal knew nothing about. I closed the old account. The one he and Bianca were planning to link to. They thought my paycheck was a few $1,000s a month. They had no idea about my real income. They had no idea that my little library job was as a senior director, a position that commanded a significant salary and managed a multi-million-dollar acquisitions budget. They had never once asked. They just saw librarian and thought poor. I spent the next 24 hours in a state of cold, precise fury. While Marcus's team, quiet as ghosts, professionally wrapped and removed 30 years of my life, the Eames chair, the original art, the thousands of valuable books, the Persian rugs, I packed a single suitcase. And as I packed, I thought. Why this, why now? Their greed was obvious, but this was desperate. Jamal's tech startup was, by all appearances, thriving. They had the new car, the designer clothes, the condo I'd never been invited to. It didn't add up. Then, my hand brushed against a framed photo on my nightstand, one of the last items to be packed. It was me and Jamal, from last year, at the library's annual gala. He looked so proud, standing next to me in the main archive vault. I remembered that night clearly. He had been fascinated by one of our collections, the Holloway Ledgers. A dry, dull series of 19th-century shipping manifests and land grants. He'd spent an hour asking questions about the security, the access, the digitization process. I had found it odd at the time. Jamal had no interest in history. The hidden secret suspense began to bloom in my mind. What if his interest wasn't academic? What if their empire wasn't built on a startup? What if it was built on something he had found? Something he stole? Something from my archive? A man who would steal his mother's paycheck would certainly steal from her job. A cold chill ran down my spine. This wasn't just about financial abuse. This was about something far, far worse. The next day, 6:50 p.m. I had just finished signing the listing papers with the realtor. The house was sold. A cash offer, closed in 5 days. Marcus's team had finished. The house was not just empty. It was sterile. The walls were bare. The hardwood floors, once warm and covered, were now vast, echoing plains of wood. The scent of pot roast was replaced by the sharp, chemical smell of industrial cleaner. I stood in the center of the living room, my one suitcase at my feet. I waited. At 7:03 p.m., I heard Jamal's key in the lock. The door swung open. "Ma," he called out, his voice jovial. "It smells weird in here. Did you burn the... He and Bianca walked in. They stopped dead. Their mouths fell open. They looked at the empty room. They looked at the empty dining room beyond it. They looked at the bare walls, the echoing floors, the sterile, cavernous space where a home used to be. They screamed in shock. It was a raw, guttural sound of pure, panicked disbelief. What is this?" Bianca shrieked, her voice cracking. "Where's everything? Where's the furniture? The bank?" Jamal yelled, his face turning a blotchy red as he fumbled for his phone. "She's been robbed." "Ma. Did you call the police?" "My God, they took everything." I looked up at them, my expression placid, my hands clasped in front of me. "No, Jamal," I said, my voice echoing slightly in the empty room. "I haven't been robbed." He stared at me, his panic shifting to a terrifying, dawning confusion. "Then, where?" You said from now on, my paycheck goes into your account, I said clearly. You were right. I decided to centralize my assets. I just cashed them out. The furniture, the art, the house, it's all being liquidated. It will be a very, very large check. I picked up my suitcase. You wanted my income, son. You just forgot to ask about my assets. As for dinner, the kitchen is closed. Permanently. Jamal's scream was a raw, primal sound of pure, panicked rage. Bianca's was a sharp, high-pitched shriek of disbelief. They stood, frozen, in the vast, echoing emptiness of my living room. What did you do? Bianca hissed, her eyes darting around as if the furniture might reappear. Where is your stuff? This is a joke, right? This is some kind of sick, senile joke. The bank. The money. Jamal was clutching his phone, his fingers jabbing at the screen. He was likely trying to access the joint account he'd bullied me into, the one he planned to link my paycheck to. The account I had closed 24 hours ago. Ma. What did you do? The account is gone. The bank says it's closed. Where is the money? I zipped my single suitcase. The sound was deafening in the silence. I did exactly what you told me to do, Jamal, I said, my voice cold and clear, no longer the soft, pliable tone of Ma. This was the voice of Dr. Althea Reed, Senior Director of Conservation. You told me to centralize my assets. So I did. I liquidated them. The furniture, the rugs, the art, this house, it's all being converted to cash. It is all being centralized. You sold the house? Bianca whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. The sheer speed, the finality of my countermove, was something her greedy, slow-moving mind couldn't process. The sale closes in 5 days, I said, walking toward the door. Cash offer. No contingencies. Jamal blocked my path, his face a mottled purple. The shock had finally given way to the deep, terrifying rage I knew so well. You can't do this. You can't. We need that money. You don't understand what you've done. Oh, I understand perfectly, I said, looking him dead in the eye. You don't need anything anyway, right? That's what you told me. My paycheck. My assets. My house. It's all the same. You just made one mistake. What? He snarled. You forgot to ask. I sidestepped him and walked out the front door. I did not look back. I left them standing in the vast, empty, echoing tomb of their own greed. I got into my car and drove away, my hand steady on the wheel. My new home was a penthouse suite at the Hotel Grand, a place of quiet luxury, paid for 3 months in advance. From my window, I could see the entire city, including the Gothic spires of the university library where I had dedicated my life. This was my new war room. The first 24 hours were about securing my new life. The second 24 hours were about uncovering the truth about theirs. My suspicion about the Holloway ledgers wasn't just a hunch, it was a cold hypothesis that needed to be tested. I made a call, not to a lawyer, but to my oldest friend and colleague, Dr. Elias Thorne, the university provost. Elias, I said, it's Althea. I need your help. It's a matter of the archive's integrity. Althea, his voice was warm but immediately serious. Whatever you need. What's wrong? I need you to authorize a covert digital audit of the Special Collections access logs, specifically for the Holloway ledgers. I need to know who has accessed them in the last year, and if any digital copies were made. And Elias, it must be completely confidential. The Holloway ledgers? He was audibly surprised. The 19th century artists' journals? They're priceless, but hardly our most high-demand item. May I ask what this is about? I believe my son, Jamal, accessed them. And I believe he did it to facilitate a crime. A very, very large one. Elias didn't hesitate. I'll initiate the audit immediately. Our server keeps a watermark and a digital footprint of every scan. If he touched them, we'll know. While Elias began his investigation, I began mine. Jamal's startup was called New Heritage Art Group. On the surface, it was a bespoke, high-end online gallery, specializing in rediscovered 19th-century European and American art. Bianca, with her background in auction house marketing, ran the sales side. They were the talk of the art world, a dynamic young couple uncovering lost masterpieces. They were also, I suspected, the most successful art forgers in the country. The Holloway ledgers were the perfect tool. Holloway wasn't just an artist, he was a meticulous diarist. His journals contained not only his personal life, but his formulas. The specific chemical compositions of his pigments. The way he treated his canvases. The secret techniques he used to create a luminous effect that no one had ever been able to replicate. The ledgers were, quite literally, a step-by-step instruction manual for creating a perfect Holloway painting. And even more damningly, the ledgers contained a private catalog of his work, including sketches of pieces he had destroyed and deemed failures. My hypothesis was terrifyingly clear. Jamal and Bianca weren't just selling forgeries. They were using the ledgers to create new, lost Holloway paintings, using his own techniques to paint his failures, and then using the very ledgers they stole from my library to authenticate them. It was brilliant. It was evil. And it was a direct assault on my entire life's work. I didn't just conserve books, I conserved history. I protected the authentic from the fake. And my son was using my own archive to poison the well. The antagonists, meanwhile, were spiraling. My disappearance had sent them into a blind panic. They had lost their free meals. They had lost the house they were clearly planning to take. But most importantly, they had lost the control they thought they had over me. And, as I suspected, they were desperate. On the third day, there was a pounding on my hotel suite door. I looked through the peephole. It was Jamal and Bianca, their faces pale and furious. They had tracked me down. I opened the door. "How could you?" Jamal roared, pushing his way in. "You're trying to ruin us. You're trying to destroy your own family." Bianca swept past me, her eyes landing on the luxurious suite. "So this is where you're hiding? Spending all our money? We had plans, you selfish old woman. We have partners. We have obligations." "Your money?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. I let the door click shut. "I don't believe I have any of your money, Bianca. I have my money. The money I earned. The money I inherited. The money you both planned to steal, starting with my paycheck. You don't understand." Jamal's voice was desperate, his bravado gone. "This isn't a joke. You have to put the money back. You have to stop the sale of the house. They're counting on that equity." "What people, Jamal?" I asked. "What obligations? The partners in your tech startup? Or the partners in your forgery ring?" Their faces. The blood drained from them both at the same instant. They looked at me as if I had just struck them. How did you?" Bianca stammered. "The Holloway ledgers, Jamal," I said. "You should have known. You can't steal the most valuable item from a library and not expect the senior conservator to notice. You are sloppy." Jamal lunged at me, his hand raised. I didn't flinch. "Security!" I called out, my voice sharp. He froze. He knew, in this high-end hotel, he was outmatched. His street thug tactics wouldn't work here. "Get out," I said, pointing to the door. "Get out of my hotel. Don't ever come near me again. Consider this your final warning." They stared at me, their faces a mixture of pure hatred and abject terror. They saw me. Not Ma. Not the meek provider of pot roasts. They saw Dr. Althea Reed, and they were terrified. They turned and fled. An hour later, my phone rang. It was Dr. Thorne. Althea, he said, his voice heavy with disgust. You were right. And it's worse than you thought. The access logs show Jamal logged in using your master credentials. He's been doing it for over a year. And 6 months ago, he used a high-resolution, deep-spectrum scanner from the digital lab to copy the entire Holloway collection. He has every formula, every sketch, every secret. Thank you, Elias, I said, a cold, hard plan cementing in my mind. That's the confirmation I needed. I hung up and turned to my laptop. Bianca's frantic marketing for New Heritage Art Group was easy to find. And there it was. The centerpiece of their new collection, headlining a major private auction at the end of the week. The title of the piece, The Duchess of Alnwick. A Lost Masterpiece by Holloway. My blood ran cold. I knew that painting. It was in the ledgers. It was the one Holloway had been most proud of, and the one he had famously burned, page by page, after a disastrous love affair, an event he detailed in his journal. They hadn't just faked a painting. They had resurrected one. And they were using my stolen data to prove it was real. They're selling their own conviction, I whispered. And I'm going to be the one to deliver the final bid. Of course. The trap is set, the bait is on display, and the quiet conservator is about to close the book on her son's criminal enterprise. Here is the final, devastating conclusion to Althea's story. Part 3. The auction was held in a private, unmarked gallery in the city's wealthiest district. It was an event for the untouchably rich, a place where millions were exchanged with a polite nod. Getting an invitation was impossible, unless you were Dr. Althea Reed, a woman who had personally authenticated half the collections in the room and who, thanks to the liquidation of her assets, now possessed the kind of liquid capital that opens any door. I arrived not as Ma, but as the formidable scholar I was, dressed in a sharp, dark silk suit, my gray hair swept back. I took a seat in the back row, an unobserved shark in a tank of millionaires. Jamal was pacing nervously near the entrance, a cheap imitation of a high-end dealer. Bianca, however, was in her element. She was on the main dais, bathed in a soft spotlight, standing next to an easel that held The Duchess of Alnwick. I had to admit, the forgery was masterful. To the naked eye, it was a Holloway. The light, the pigment, the brushwork, it was all technically perfect, a soulless copy created from a stolen recipe. Ladies and gentlemen, Bianca began, her voice smooth as velvet, tonight, New Heritage Art Group is proud to present a piece thought lost to history. The Duchess of Alnwick, by Holloway. A respectful murmur went through the crowd. We know what you're thinking, Bianca continued with a practiced, confident smile. How can we be sure? For decades, this painting was known only through Holloway's meticulous journals. But our researchers, my partner, Jamal Hayes, made a once-in-a-lifetime discovery. The large screen behind her lit up. My stomach turned to ice. It was a high-resolution scan of a page from my archive. My digital watermark was faintly visible in the corner, a detail they were too arrogant or too ignorant to remove. We uncovered the original Holloway ledgers, she lied, and with them, a private addendum detailing the Duchess's completion. This is not just a painting, it is a piece of history, authenticated by the artist himself. The bidding began. It was fast, aggressive. The lost masterpiece, backed by irrefutable proof, was a collector's dream. $10 million, one bidder called. $12 million, another countered. $15 million. Jamal was vibrating, his face slick with sweat. Bianca looked like she was about to faint from the ecstasy of her own success. The auctioneer raised his gavel. Going once, going twice. Wait. My voice cut through the silence. It was not loud, but it was clear, and it carried the weight of absolute authority. Every head turned. I stood up and began to walk slowly down the aisle toward the stage. Bianca's smile froze, then twisted into a mask of pure, uncomprehending horror. Jamal saw me, and his face went as white as chalk. Who are you?" the auctioneer stammered, annoyed by the interruption. I stopped at the foot of the dais and looked up at my daughter-in-law. A very good question. Bianca, you said your researchers uncovered the Holloway ledgers. A remarkable discovery, considering they have been in the secure, climate-controlled vault of the university library for 50 years. I turned to the stunned crowd. My name is Dr. Althea Reed. I am the Senior Director of Conservation at that library. And I am the legal custodian of the Holloway ledgers. I am also Jamal's mother. A bomb had gone off. The room was in chaos. This is a family dispute. Bianca shrieked, trying to regain control. She's unwell. She's having an episode. Security. Am I? I asked calmly. I looked at the painting, then back at Bianca. You are an excellent marketer, dear. But you are a terrible historian. You were so focused on the recipe that you forgot to read the story. I pointed to the painting. This forgery is, indeed, based on a real painting. A painting that Holloway despised. If you had bothered to read the next entry in the journal, page 114, I believe, you would know that he destroyed it. He didn't just burn it, he detailed the exact chemical compound he used to dissolve the pigments before setting it on fire. I turned to the crowd, my voice rising with the power of 30 years of expertise. This painting is a fraud, created using chemical formulas and canvas aging techniques stolen from a secure academic archive. The provenance you see on that screen, I pointed to the projection, is not a discovery. It is a digital theft, perpetrated by my son, using my stolen master credentials. You lying witch. Jamal roared, finally finding his voice. He lunged at me from the side. He never made it. I wouldn't do that, son, a calm voice said. Two men, who had been standing quietly at the back, stepped forward. One was Dr. Elias Thorne, the university provost. The other was Agent Michael Davies, of the FBI's art crime team. Jamal Hayes, Bianca Hayes, Agent Davies said, his voice cutting through the stunned silence as he flashed his badge. You are both under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, interstate transportation of stolen goods. Stolen goods? Bianca shrieked. We made this. And grand larceny of intellectual property valued at over $50 million, Davies finished, nodding toward the ledger's data. Jamal collapsed, a puppet with his strings cut. Bianca just stared, her mouth opening and closing, a fish pulled from the water. The partners and obligations they were so worried about were now a room full of the world's richest people, all looking at them with the cold fury of those who have been conned. The resolution was swift. Jamal, facing irrefutable digital evidence, confessed to everything. He and Bianca were found guilty. Their new heritage art group was a sham, its assets, all purchased with fraudulent money, were seized. They were facing long prison sentences. They had lost their condo, their new car, their status, and their freedom. They were, in a word, ruined. But my story wasn't about their ruin. It was about my legacy. My entire life had been dedicated to protecting the physical past. My son had shown me the terrifying vulnerability of the digital past. I used my liquidated assets and my newfound freedom to establish the Reed Institute for Archive Integrity. My new mission, my new legacy, was to create the next generation of digital security for the world's priceless cultural artifacts. I now travel the world, consulting with libraries and museums, teaching them how to protect their history from the modern-day thieves who, as I know all too well, can sometimes come from inside your own home. I found my peace, not in a quiet house filled with old furniture, but in a sleek, modern apartment overlooking the city. My son told me I didn't need anything. He was right. I didn't need the house, the rugs, or the pot roast. I didn't need him. All I ever needed was my mind, my integrity, and my purpose. What this story teaches us is that you should never, ever underestimate a quiet woman. Especially if she's a librarian. She knows where all the secrets are buried, and she knows how to dig them up. If you were inspired by Althea's story, make sure to hit that like button. And subscribe to the channel for more stories where the quietest person in the room has the final, victorious word. We'll see you in the next one.